So let's get to it. Yeah, we have the third part of our video here in our series of setting up Betaflight 4.1 and RPM filtering with bidirectional DShot and all the other goodies that go along with that. So we're going to talk about my base settings that I started with since I've been testing 4.0 to 4.1 development versions, and now we're on official releases. So we've installed official release 4.1.1 and we've set up our bidirectional DShot and RPM filtering and tested. So let's go through the rest of our settings right now and we'll zoom in and give it a look. So let's check this out. We've got our TBS source 1. We're running that iFlight Sussex Twin G. This is the version 1. It's not the version 1.2 or the newer version of the iFlight F7 Twin G. It's the first one. Bought it as a stack with the 50 amp ESC. So it's 32-bit ESC. Let's plug in here, see what we have going. Go through the rest of those. I want to talk more about our loop speeds and do some testing on. There's been some conversation online with the last video I posted. Betaflight groups, and been a lot of talk on loop speeds, update speeds, and motor protocols using DShot 300, using 600, 8K 4K, 8K 8K, 4K 4K. So let's check it out. And we will get our radio powered on here.
Welcome to OpenTX.
I already made sure we're on 10 milliwatt transmitting over there, crossfire. So let's get Betaflight turned up here. We've already discussed my ports. See, I'll put a link in the description for the other videos so you can see the rest of the stuff we went through here. Right now we're on 300, DShot 300. You can see my ESC bidirectional 14 motor poles, standard 2207 motor, Xing 2207, 1700 kV. They have 14 motor poles. So by default, when I installed this version of 4.1, it put 8.4 in there by default. So I just left it at that. Thought, well, we'll see what it does. I've tested, all my testing has been 4.4, and has flown well with that. I've ran 4.4 up to DShot 600, and that's been testing really well. No rear twitches or anything. Haven't tried to go above 4.4. And haven't tried to go above, well, DShot 600 worked with that, so we'll go from there. That's what we're going to start here. We'll see what this does, but yeah, my crossfire basic settings. Let's see, if you guys want to see like fail safe, I do the standard hold, my arm and the 10 on your stage 2. That's the only thing I do in there. But let's talk about PID tuning. So, as I'm sure many of you are aware, in 4.0 and on, PID tuning became quite a bit different. There was a lot of changes, and I noticed, if you've seen any of my videos when I was first testing 4.0, a lot of interesting things, good things and bad things, pros and cons. I was really picky on my yaw, and I see a lot of other comments on that too, of yaw twitch and weird things. Not yaw twitch, but yaw bounce or kickback, like the nose doesn't want to stay put on quick yaw movements. It's primarily when you stop your quick yaw movements. That's what I ran into a lot. So the reason I bring that up is I started experimenting with things like absolute control and integrated yaw. So that's why I want to bring that up before we even get into these. If you look in some of the original, you have your GitHub articles for Betaflight 4.0 tuning notes and 4.1 tuning notes. There are some things mentioned in 4.0 that were introduced that you don't see a whole lot of mention in 4.1 because they weren't introduced in 4.1, they came out in 4.0. Such as, well, I shouldn't say that, integrated yaw, which is, I don't think it came out in 4. Absolute control's been around a while. Integrated yaw might have came out in 4. I can't quite remember right, but that's when I started experimenting with it because I was having these yaw issues. So I started looking into this integrated yaw and experimenting, testing that, and you'll notice if you look up that integrated yaw, they give a little example of some CLI commands if you're going to try integrated yaw. One of the things that's, I believe, required for integrated yaw is you need absolute control enabled. And they give an example here of a value of 10. So that's what I started with. And just to mention, I-term rotation needs to be off. I haven't been using any I-term rotation. That seemed to be more of an LOS pilot kind of thing anyway, I'm not sure. But the big thing to bring up is how much it changes your tuning, especially on yaw. You're not going to have any I-term on your yaw axis. And if you read through this little article, they'll explain why. Because of the inherent problems with tuning yaw, it's different than tuning pitch and roll. It's different than yaw P doesn't so much act like proportional and pitch and roll. It acts a little bit different. Same thing with I and D. But you can read through here, see what they describe there. But that's where I got my yaw tuning. So if we go back to my Betaflight, you'll notice I have 0 in my yaw integral, and I have a value of 30 in derivative. So I've brought that up, and I have a D min in my yaw. So I have value of 10, absolute control, no I-term, VBAC compensation, integrated yaw, and it's just you just enable integrated yaw. Oh, our radio's complaining. So that's basically the only, you'll notice I do have, that was the default yaw P anyway that they mentioned. And yaw P 30, yaw D 20, and a little bit lower yaw feed forward, which I stuck with what they said too. And I tested that on some of these development versions, and I really liked it. It really kept that yaw feel locked in a lot more. If I go with the default feed forward, I tend to get a little bit of kick when I come back. And I haven't changed yaw proportional at all. Seems really good right where it's at. And you'll notice I've bumped up pitch and roll yaw P just a few. Default, I believe, is 46 and 42. And you'll notice I've put them up just a bit. And the only reason I did that was noticing when I was testing some of my high G corners or dives, pulling out of dives, I would notice some of that pitch and roll just wasn't quite holding on where locked in where I would like it to be. Needed just a little more authority, and that little bit of change seemed to help. And that's another big point I think to bring up with tuning with 4.0 and above, and especially if you're going to try to use absolute control. It seems to make everything much more sensitive as far as if you're making changes, make more minute changes. So you also notice I've dropped integral. They mention that in working with absolute control is your I-terms don't need to be as high, because it doesn't say it so straightforward, but from what it sounds like, absolute control is it's working as an I-term. It's like an additional I-term, and it kind of sounds like it might be a dynamic I-term. So it's interesting, and I've liked it so far. So that's where I'm at with. I use absolute control value 10. Now let's talk about I-term relax. The only thing I change is I added, default is roll pitch. I put roll pitch yaw, and that seemed to also help with some of that. Maybe I'm getting some I-term build up, too much I-term in yaw. So everything else was left default. 4.0 was using gyro as default I-term relax, and it seems to be now 4.1 they've changed that to set point, and it does seem to, what I've noticed is when you're just cruising and you're no control inputs, just kind of holding throttle and look off into that the horizon, and with it set on gyro, I was getting just a little bit of movement out there. You could see some jello in those far distance. but when it's set on set point on my setup, everything seems much more flat in that circumstance when you don't have any inputs. So that seemed to help that for me. So that's, anti-gravity, I bump up to about 7. I notice when it's on default 5, and I've played with that, bumping up I-term more to help, because default I'll notice when I'm doing the quick throttle changes, throttle up, throttle down, and the nose will move up and down a little bit with that instead of just staying attitude. And in the past, typically I was raising I-term up more and more to help with that, because that is kind of an I-term thing. But that's what anti-gravity is for, is specifically on quick throttle changes. So it'll boost, a quick boost on your I-term during those throttle changes, so that you don't have to always have such a high I-term all the time. And I think that was kind of the thing, was I was running into that where I was using so much I-term that even when you're just idling and cruising around, it's like your I-term is fighting your D-term is too much. So, and that's where I like using tools like that, like anti-gravity and things. It seems to help with, you don't have to run things so high all the time. Okay, rates. You can look through my rates. You guys probably know about, you have your RC rate, super rate, and expo. And I dropped my RC rate down just a little bit to make it more flat around the center of the sticks. I dropped super rate a little as well, and I add just a touch of expo. And that just helps me with it being more shaky. If I was going to race, I would probably reduce the expo, maybe even increase RC rate. Not so that my rates are faster, but it's more responsive, and then I'll lower my super rate, because I don't want faster rates. I just want it more responsive around the middle of the sticks. I don't want it sluggish, where this would probably be more of a freestyle cruising and things and doing tricks, because it's a little bit more forgiving on the sticks, and it's not going to show all those little twitch movements. And where racing, you're not so much concerned about how smooth and the flat. You want it responsive, but not quick rates. I don't want fast rates while I'm racing. Maybe faster rates in freestyle for doing my quick flips and rolls. So just a quick rundown of that. But what I really want to get into, and is the good stuff, I think, especially when you're getting into RPM filtering and all this, is your filters, and your filters in general. You're still going to be using your standard filters along with RPM filterings, but things are going to change just a little bit when using RPM filtering. So let's get into filtering the good stuff. Okay, let's talk about filters, and I might make another video just talking more about absolute control and integrated yaw and R-term relax and those, because I know we just kind of flew over that, but those are tools that I found really handy. I like them. I use them. So, filters. Before we plug in, just to point you guys, I've used this article a lot in the other videos. An excellent GitHub article, Bidirectional DShot and RPM filter. Just search that on Google and look for the GitHub. And it's updated 12 days ago. He's been updating this as it goes. I was using this over the development versions, and it told you how to go make your custom hex files for your ESC. And now they tell you, it's all built into, it's an official release now in BL Heli configurator. So you just go download the latest one and install it. It's in my first video. But what I like to use this for also, they give you a basic rundown of how to set up bidirectional DShot and RPM filter, because it's not just on by default when you install Betaflight 4.1. And there's a couple of little changes you want to make, primarily with your filters, your notch filters. You do want to make it more narrow of a band, because RPM filtering is now carrying some of that load, and you don't need so much doubling up on the notch filters. So let's get down to, speaking of that, one of the first things they mention on tuning. RPM filter will do the heavy lifting of removing nearly all motor noise without adding much latency. There's general junk noise from bearings, environmental, that will not be removed RPM filters. Some low pass filters you still want. So it doesn't get rid of everything. That's why you don't want to just, some are saying, well, why do you need the other filters if you're using RPM filters? It doesn't, right there it tells you, it doesn't deal with a lot of junk noise, environmental noise, bad motors, things like that. But you still want to change your dynamic notch just a bit. You can see here the range medium, width percent 0, 250 on your notch Q, 150 on your notch min, and we'll put those in here. So that's where I get my numbers. It shows you the default filters, so if you get changing and experimenting, it's easy to go back. And what I had done on my development versions was I went down and tried this lifting 1.5 times after successful flight. And these are what I've been running a while. These run really well on my setup. I also tried lifting 2 times. I started getting a little bit of weird things happening when I went up twice, lifted twice. Things like if I came down and touched when I landed, it would kind of freak out a little bit. It wouldn't shoot off to the moon, but it would do weird things like that. It didn't react to things very nicely. If you touched a gate or something, it would kind of really freak out. So I went back down. But I really like that 1.5, and that's why I'll show you where I got that. So that's our basic filter changes, is I apply those, and I apply the notch filters, which you can also get. They still have the snippets down here, which are nice. When we talk about, in the last video, we talked about timer-based bidirectional DShot. And good to have for notes. Just look at the snippet for your flight controller. Mine's the EXF7. And at the very bottom, it shows you those dynamic notch, and it's the same thing as what they showed in here. So just pointing that out. But that is where I got those. I don't lift them completely. Mainly because, too, I worry about if I have a damaged prop or broken prop, I don't want to burn up my motors. Some may not be concerned about that. If you're just going out racing and you just need it to perform maximum performance and you don't care if it breaks something, lift them and go for it, Send it. Sure, our radio on here. We didn't go through our radio screen. We'll do that after filters. So let's connect PIDs. So we're talking about rates and filters. That is where I got my filters there. That's these values here. I just copied these. I copied that set. I'll go into my CLI. I'll just paste them in there. Copy that set. I'll do this one just to show you guys. I'll do a copy. I'll do a paste right there. Yeah, changed all those. Copy those. Paste there. Good. And for kicks, we'll go to that snippet where it showed these 3 sets for our dynamic notch filters. Paste those in there. We now have our dynamic notch filters set. The one that I did not see in there was the minimum hertz. So we have our notch filters, we have that min notch. Let's make sure that's in there. So when we've done that, you want to do a save. It's going to reboot the flight controller. Back to PIDs and filters. Let's see what we're at. So it's at 150 on the notch min. I may have put that in already, or that might be default, but make sure you've got 150, 250, 0 medium. Gyro RPM filters, 3 and 100. That's what I believe that's default. That was in, I was looking for that yesterday, and I couldn't find in any of these tuning notes. But that was mentioned under RPM filtering. I remember that you want to make sure and have your filter harmonics number at 3 and the min frequency at 100. believe that's default, but I just want to throw that out there because that's not in any of these notes, but I know I saw that in here. Just something to mention. Watch those gyro RPM filter numbers. And that's where these all come from. So I like those. Okay, filters. Let's talk about receiver. I run TAER. That's just always what I've ran. My radio came set up that way, and that's how I ran my Tyrannus. So, and I have Crossfire. So, and to throw out there in Betaflight 4.1, with Crossfire anyway, you do not need to set any RSSI channel, no auxiliary channels on your radio. It doesn't need to take up an auxiliary port because Crossfire uses the RXTX ports on your UART port that you wire your nano receiver up to. All that is passed through those channels. So it previously Betaflight did not have that programming in there, so you had to use an RSSI channel, but now it's all in there. Link quality and RSSI, everything just passes right through there. Let's see, we've got good numbers. Endpoints, check your endpoints. That looks good. Which none of this should change when you're updating your FC, because all that's through your receiver. So we're all good through there. I have my different aux ports, turtle mode, launch mode. So we look good there. I don't change anything else in receiver. Modes, I add an arming, aux1, my beeper, aux3. I have flip over, turtle mode, aux2.
Turtle mode.
And launch mode, aux4.
Launch mode.
Yep. Good, that's it there. And honestly, guys, that's about it. If you want to see my OSD setup, that's what I use for OSD. I put my power over on the left side here, and my signal strength over on the right with my temperatures, and I put link quality up here top. So I just turn those on. I put my warnings at the bottom. I like to have stuff down low there because that's where you'll have your props and things. I'm usually not looking a whole lot down there. You're usually looking more up and around. But it's kind of messy, I know, but we're testing still too. If I were to go race or go to an event, I'd probably kill more than half these. I'd probably just use my average cell. On this side would be the only thing left, not my total cell or my draw or anything. And I would just have RSSI or link quality and my craft name, and that's about it. One good point to bring up, I've had a couple requests. I do not use video transmitter tab. I don't use VTX in Betaflight. Crossfire, you wire up your nano port 4 straight to your smart audio wire on your TBS Unify video transmitter, and it passes smart audio from your receiver to your video controller. And remember, your receiver is connected with a full UART port to the board, so you can still make Betaflight changes and everything that way too, through LUA scripts, Lewis scripts, and or my goggles. Either way, I have the yaw left pitch up. I can still make changes through there. I can make changes through it. So it's a really seamless way to set up OSD smart audio, and it works great. I love using it that way, and I love using my radio to change. Works well at events too, so I don't have to pull my goggles out. When you're in between events, in between heats or whatever, and I can put it in pit mode that way so that I can actually power up and look at things. While we're talking about that, let's disconnect here because we're getting hot. I don't like to leave it plugged in for an extended period of time like that. Even though my video transmitter power and everything is turned down, the flight controller does warm up. Uh-oh. So, we'll let that cool down a little bit. We'll take a little break and I'll be right back.